الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone and peace be upon you all. Welcome to our halaqah. I see some new faces, some familiar faces. Welcome. So this series again is about awakening and transforming, and last week we talked about the importance of awakening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's truths and how our soul needs a reminder of those truths constantly. And we talked about how Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would consistently remind himself of Allah's truths. And I said the dua where when he would wake up in the middle of the night, he would recite this dua, affirming all that is true, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us, right? That He is al-Haq, and that the Quran is true, and that our destination is true, and all of the reminders that Allah teaches us about our path in this world. We constantly need that connection, because if we don't root ourselves in truth, we will root ourselves in the opposite of truth, which is what? Falsehood, right? So we have to understand that we're always making that choice, that if we abandon truth or neglect our connection to truth, we will find ourselves being deceived to think that other things that are false are true. And that's the test of this world. That's the test of this path in this world, is having a heart or being able to see truth as truth. And this is why this is a dua that we're taught to make, right? Oh Allah, allow us to see truth as truth and guide us to follow it, and allow us to see falsehood as falsehood and guide us to basically stay away from it, right? And so we always want to have a heart that is awakened to truth. And that truth is, you can't awaken in the absence of truth. You can't nourish your soul. You can't thrive. You can't grow. You can't do anything in the absence of truth, right? If you lie to yourself, for instance, can you expect to grow? No. So you have to be truthful, and you have to prioritize truth in your life. Am I grounded in truth? Am I guided by truth? Am I rooted in truth? Is what I'm saying true? Is what I'm doing true? Am I aligned with truthful values, truthful beliefs, right? It's not a matter of just, it feels good and that's it. That's what I'm going to do. So last week we talked about the importance of awakening to Allah's truths and constantly revisiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's truths through, igniting a connection with the Quran, a direct relationship with the Quran, saying the dua that I mentioned last week, consistently as well, following that example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in affirming those truths that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us about. Today, though, I want to focus on the truths within ourselves that we need to awaken to. There's so many distractions in our world, so much chaos happening around us, as you can see just this week, right? Or these last 2 weeks with Libya, the flood in Libya, the recent earthquake in Morocco, and just this whole year, right? We're constantly hearing about things that are happening. And aside from that, even with social media, you're constantly, in the online world, you're constantly being exposed to so much negativity. You're just constantly aware of so many things that are happening, and it can get quite distracting. People feel overwhelmed. We're living in a time where people feel like they're scattered. And so you're inundated with all this news, you're inundated with all this information constantly. So what do we do when we're feeling like this? When we feel overwhelmed, when we feel helpless at the things that are happening in the world? I mean, as a human being, you hear about all these things and you want to do something, and you can only do something to a certain extent. But all these feelings can be quite overwhelming. So how do we center ourselves, and how do we continue this path of awakening and transforming? So like I said, last week we talked about awakening to God's truths. This week I want us to talk about awakening to ourselves in the truths that are guiding our behaviors. Because at the end of the day, one of the reasons we tend to feel more anxious and in our world today and more scattered is because we have lost sight or lost connection to what is in our power. And I touched upon this briefly at the end of last session where, like, it's really important to constantly assess what is in your control. Because as you're, constantly navigating your path, there are so many things you can't control. So many things. You can't control other people. You can't control what news you're going to hear tomorrow. You can't control who and when is going to leave this world, right? You can't control so many things. So when we feel scattered, when we feel that disconnect, when we feel the opposite of being awakened, which is going through this world as if we're asleep, what choice do we have other than to focus on what is in our power and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on our path to have the power to change? And this is something that is so beautiful about Islam, is that it always awakens us to the power we have to change something and to do good and to look for value regardless of our external circumstances. That we have the power to cultivate this home within and this peace within, even if outside of us there might not be peace and there might be chaos. You see this happening over here, conflict over here, and you feel like, you can't control those things, right? So, but we have that opportunity to build that peaceful space within. And the way that we do that is we start taking back our power. Wow, I place my power to always feel good in the hands of this person, or I place my worth in this. I tied my worth and my peace and my security in so many things that I can't control. And I really encourage you to assess this in your life. What have I tied my worth to? Because whatever you tie your worth to, you are at the mercy of every single day. If you tied your worth to people, for example, you need people to always be happy with you, for you to feel good enough, for you to feel worthy. And guess what? Every single day, you're at the mercy of other people. You're at the mercy of what they're going to say. You're at the mercy of how they're going to react. You're at the mercy of their very emotion. So, are they upset today? Are they angry today? Are they complete disconnect from yourself? So, you always have to assess, what is my worth tied to? And that changes, by the way. And that is the constant test for us, throughout our lives, is always making sure that we're assessing what our worth is tied to. This is in the very testimonial of our faith. La ilaha illallah. If you notice that before we affirm, accept God, what do? What is the la ilaha part? Denying there's no other God, right? Or other deity, right? Other idol. Idol is not just, we always think like an idol is just saying someone is our Lord. What are some other idols we can affirm in our life without even realizing? Our ego. Absolutely, that's a good one. Our emotions. Yeah. Work, money, absolutely. Wealth, the hustle, right? Trying to always chase the next milestone, trying to always chase the next high. And that high doesn't necessarily have to come from, actual drugs. I always say everybody has their drug of choice. It might not be cocaine, and it might not be illegal drugs, but it's something that is giving them that high. Sometimes it's people. Sometimes, it's achieving a certain status, fame, whatever it is, right? Everybody has something. For some people, it's fashion, right? For some people, it's appearing a certain way. Everybody has their drug of choice. Some people, it's food. It's a common one because food is halal. It's not illegal. So it's very easy to make that, your drug of choice, to always go to that, to give you that next high when you're not feeling well, or not feeling good. That's why emotional eating is something that is a common coping mechanism. But in our testimonial, when we say La ilaha illallah, it has a purifying component. This is why it's so powerful, and why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us to increase in this dhikr so frequently. Because you don't realize what it is freeing you from. Allah does not need us to affirm Him. But as you affirm His presence and His truth and Him being your one Lord and only Lord, you are also negating all the false idols that you're attached to. Today, in our world today, the religions of our time, the worship of our time is the worship of the self, the worship of emotions, the worship of, ego, me, myself, and I, the worship of feeling good. So today, the religions of modern day, worship of love, right? The religions of modern day are not necessarily, that formalized or structuralized religion that we think of, right? Or the way we think of religion. But religion is really anything that or worship is anything that you devote yourself to. If you look up worship, you'll see words like what? Admiration, devotion. So we're all programmed to worship something, by the way. And in psychology, there's a saying by Carl Jung. He's one of the early Western psychologists, and he says, God denotes a person's highest value. So in essence, everybody has a God. And I mentioned this before. And I tend to remind people of this because I think that we have this idea that if we don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not worshiping anything. And that's actually a misconception. You're always whatever is your highest value in life, that's what you're worshiping. That's what you're devoted to. That's what you're admiring. That's what you are revolving yourself around. And so when we say La ilaha illallah, and that's why we should say it frequently, because we're constantly purifying. I don't want to have anything as my highest value other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't want to be led by falsehood. Because anything that you make your highest value will not be able to sustain your devotion to it. It's like I always give the example of the solar system and the planets. If anything, only the sun has the greatest gravitational pull to keep the planets in its orbit. If the planets revolved around anything else, it wouldn't be able to sustain it. It wouldn't be able to sustain that orbit. So only the sun can sustain that harmony. And it's the same thing in our life. If we try to revolve our life or make anything else other than the one true God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as our highest value, we also, nothing else, no other false deity is able to sustain us, our devotion to it. So when you devote yourself to something else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you make something else your highest value, it won't be able to sustain your devotion. It will destroy you. Just as there will be chaos in the solar system if, let's say, the sun, if the planets revolved around anything else other than the sun, there would be chaos because there wouldn't be anything else with that gravitational pull to be able to sustain the orbit. And so this is the way we were designed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us signs. And so it's important to, when we awaken to ourselves, we always have to ask, what else have I been making my highest value? Where have I tied my worth to the most? What is it that I'm at the mercy of constantly? And by asking yourself these questions, what you're doing is you're starting the work of freeing your heart from its shackles. Because, and it's really from the shackles of the nafs, because the nafs is always eager to attach itself to certain things for comfort, so it could feel good. It's that illusion. And so that's one thing we have to do, is always ask ourselves, what am I guided by? What are the things that have been driving my emotions, my actions, my day to day? And this is why we constantly have to take inventory of and I mention this a lot, when people want to change, they often make big lofty goals without assessing how their one day changes or what habits they're engaging in on a day-to-day basis. So whenever you want to change, just take one day in your life. How do you live that day? What does a typical day look like for you? And by looking at your typical days, even just this week, you can say, this week I'm going to assess what is important to me, which something I'm going to elaborate on more. So we have to, by awakening to ourselves, we have to get to know ourselves. And this is something that we know in our tradition. You know, a saying in our tradition is, Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. So knowing ourselves is connected to our knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because the more you know yourself, and the more, like, you know, when you sit with nature and you're like getting to know things in nature, what do we usually say? We say subhanallah, right? Because it points us to the creator. When you look at a masterpiece, you look at a piece of art, people always ask what? Who is the artist? Right? Especially if it's a masterpiece, who did this? Who made this? It's the same thing with ourselves. We are his creation too. So when we get to know ourselves, when we explore who we are, how Allah fashioned us, how Allah created us, and when we get to know, you know, we spend that work in increasing our self-awareness, we can't do it without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He is al-Musawwir, right? He's the one who fashioned us. And so knowing ourselves can be a means to knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as we don't make the ego our destination. As long as we don't make ourselves a destination. Ya Allah, help me know. And I mentioned this last week about how even when it comes to knowing ourselves, we want to know what benefits us. We don't just want to know everything, because not every piece of knowledge about who you are is going to help you, right? We only want to know what benefits us. And this is something that we're not taught in our world today, right? We think that, like, you know, always increasing in, I want to know everything about myself, right? I want to know. No, you want to know what is beneficial about yourself. Because maybe if Allah unveils you from knowing something about yourself that you're not ready for at a certain time, right? You might not be able to do anything with it. So and that trains you to not make yourself the destination. So even on the path of knowing myself, Ya Allah, you are my destination. Even on the path of transformation, on growing, Ya Allah, I cannot do it without you. This is how you protect this heart. And you protect your ego, right? You protect yourself from being ego-led. Is that even as you're trying to grow and thrive and change, who is your destination? What is your end goal? Is Jannah still your goal? Because if it isn't, you're going to end up burdening yourself more than you were designed to bear. You see, the more that you're disconnected from your ultimate goal, the more you're disconnected from Allah being your destination, this world and everything in it becomes your permanent reality. Everything seems more urgent, everything seems important, and that's really hard to live like that, you know, because not everything's important. And I always give this example, like, it's like, imagine if you're on vacation and you gave everything the same importance as you would when you were home. Would you enjoy that vacation? Would you maximize that vacation? You know that on vacation there are things you wait until you get back home to take care of. It's the same thing, but in our world today, in this world, what we do is because we're so disconnected from the grander plan, we're so disconnected from how short our time is in this world. SubhanAllah, so short that, and this is in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us on the Day of Judgment, how many, you know, basically how long did we live on earth? You know what we're going to say? We lived a day or part of a day. That's how short this dunya is compared to the grander scheme, to the grander plan. But yet we live as if it's our permanent reality. So this is why we can't talk about awakening and transforming without a connection to the akhirah, without a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being our destination, without a connection to us working for Jannah. And this is what's happening. I see this a lot in the self-help world, right? And in the healing world, in the popular psychology world. It's a lot of talk about healing and growing and thriving with a disconnect, or without a connection to the akhirah, without a connection to the nature of the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us about, without a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and without a connection to our ultimate goal, which is Jannah. Not realizing that when we cut ourselves off from those truths, we actually do not get to fully and truly heal. We can't heal. And last week I mentioned the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, do not be like those who forgot Allah, He made them forget themselves, right? I mentioned this last time. And I said that what this means essentially is that when you forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you do not get to awaken to your needs, to what you truly need to transform and grow. So healing, growing, thriving, our transformation, and even knowing ourselves cannot be with our self or ego as a destination. Allah has to be the destination. So that we begin by saying, Ya Allah, I ask you, Allahumma as'alaka ilman nafa'an wa a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa. I ask you for knowledge that is beneficial, and I seek refuge in you from knowledge that does not benefit me. And you could add, even when it comes to myself. Ya Allah, just show me what I need to do to get to Jannah. And to live a life that is peaceful and lighthearted, so I don't carry more than I need to carry. And sometimes people will say this, right? Like, they'll say, oh, I wish I knew this earlier. I wish I knew that earlier. And I always say, maybe if Allah had unveiled you to know that earlier, especially on the healing journey, when people start healing and they start doing the inner work, they get upset, they get regretful sometimes that they didn't know something earlier. And I always say, Allah's in control of what you know, but also when He unveils you to know it. And so had He possibly unveiled you to know something earlier, maybe you would not have been ready for it. And maybe knowledge is an amana. So when He shows you something, you have to do something with it, right? So had He unveiled you from something that you needed to know about yourself, maybe you wouldn't have done anything beneficial with it. So Allah knows us more than we know ourselves, right? And so when He unveils us from something, or He shows you a truth about yourself, thank Him and ask Him for help in actually applying that knowledge and doing something with it, because that's what we want. We want knowledge that benefits. And what is benefit? Do we see that benefit in our actions and our behaviors? So again, we want to awaken to our truths, but we want to always make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our destination. And this really lifts so much burden from us. It really does. Because then you don't carry more than you need to carry. You don't burden your mind more than you need to burden your mind. So I often bring in my home method in this, my heart over mind and ego method. And in that method, I teach that, the mind is not something that you worship. It's not something that it should be the lead of you, right? And we learn this in sujood. What do we humble in sujood? It's our mind. And so there's a lesson in this that, Ya Allah, I don't need to know everything. And I always go like this because, when you put your mind to the ground, you feel that, why is sujood such a haven for us in this world? Right? It's this peace. You get this great peace that you don't get anywhere else. Why? Because you are humbling this mind that's always trying to figure out everything. You're humbling your entire being, and you're actually surrendering to the truth that, Ya Allah, I'm not the all-knowing. This is not the all-knowing. You are the all-knowing. He is Al-Alim. And so every time you're in sujood, I encourage you to think of this. I don't need to know everything. And it's okay that I don't know everything. But Ya Allah, just help me know what I need to know about myself, about my world, about my path, that can get me to where I need to go, that can benefit me in this world and the next. Make sure that in all your prayers, whatever you're trying to seek in this world, don't forget the akhirah. This is how you train yourself to prioritize the akhirah, is that in your du'as, in your prayer, even in your prayers about transforming, about growing, about thriving, whatever you're trying to heal from, whatever you're trying to work through, make sure that you're also asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and guidance that will lead to success for you, not only in this world, but also the next. Because if you forget the akhirah in your du'as, you're going to forget to make it a priority in your life, in your actions. So again, the importance of knowing ourselves, awakening to where our worth is tied to, awakening to, what are the truths that are guiding us. And so one of the benefits too, so the benefit of knowing ourselves first and foremost is that it should lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you know yourself, the more man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. But also you do not become like a yo-yo. In today's world, I feel like, I want to say this as comprehensively as possible, and accurately as possible. I think that because of the world we're living in, we are more sensitive than ever to people. Would you say so? Right? It's the truth, right? This person said this, my whole day's ruined. This person did that, this person didn't do this. There's this heightened sensitivity to people approving and people's reactions and what's what it's creating is people becoming like yo-yos. I always use that word because it's like you go up when people are happy with you, and you go down when people are not happy with you. You have a great day when people are, good to you, and you get the reaction that you want, you get the validation that you want, and then when people don't give you that, it's a horrible day. This is a problem. Why is that a problem?
You become reliant on other people's emotions.
What did you say?
You become reliant on other people's emotions and opinions of you.
I just missed that word.
You become reliant.
Reliant, right, exactly. So you're dependent, you're at the mercy of other people's emotions and perceptions of you. Absolutely. The problem with that is that you become helpless. You become helpless. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us to be helpless through the people. We should not give people that much power. And I think a lot of people learn this, whether it's through, false beliefs, through maybe cultural ideologies or things that were just maybe the norm in how they grew up, messages that they received growing up or messages they received in their community. And sometimes those messages are wrapped so beautifully with Islam, like teaching things that are actually unhelpful, that are actually people-pleasing behaviors, and packaging them with Islam. Well, you have to be good to the people. This is rewarding, right? And so I work a lot with this issue because it's a big issue. It's where we spiritually bypass, in the sense where we use Islamic teachings to mask, unhelpful behaviors. And I see that a lot in our world, where many people are engaging in people pleasing and trying to chase people's approval and feeling a lot of heightened emotions and triggers when people are not happy with them, and then thinking that's the Islamic way to be. When it isn't. It creates so much distress. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us to be at the mercy of people's perceptions of us. We are not, Allah never asked us to monitor the impressions of people upon us. That's not something Allah gave us responsibility for. That I need to monitor a person's perception of me. When in reality, do you know that every single person in your life already has a different perception of you? You will never be able to form or impose a certain perception in every single person. It might not be a bad perception that they have of you. They just have different perceptions because people are looking through their own lens, through their own framework, through their own psychology, through their own experiences. But today, I'm telling you, people are trying so hard to control other people's impression of them. And that takes away from our sincerity. And many people don't realize this. That's why La ilaha illallah, that dhikr is so powerful. And it's so important for us to engage in it daily, because you could be having a bad day. You could be sitting there ruminating about something that somebody said, and I hope they don't think this, and I hope I got my message across, and I hope you know what I mean? And you're ruminating. I'm not talking about a passing thought. I'm talking about you're sitting there engaging in the repetitive thinking, right? About how that person's going to react or what their perception of you now is. And you're completely forgetting that let's say when you actually analyze your actions, what was your intention? You're completely forgetting your intention. You're completely forgetting, the actual truth of the matter. That you did something, you intended it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not your responsibility how it's going to land. As long, of course, you have to take the right measures. You don't say something in a rude way and then expect, it's going to land where it lands. No. But I think that in today's world, we think that it's our responsibility. And I think social media has a big part to do with that. There's just a lot of programming, I think, that is leading people. I see this a lot in my work, and that's why I'm speaking about it. There's just this heightened, this misconception that we are responsible for monitoring the perceptions of people upon us, or perceptions of people about us. It's not our responsibility. At the end of the day, what Allah sees is our heart, our efforts, and our actions. The heart, our intentions. What is the truth driving that action? What is the goodness in your heart driving that action? Your efforts. How did you go about, engaging in that action? And the action itself. Is it a good action? And so one of the benefits of really getting to know yourself is that you become more grounded and you're not as shaken by what people say about you. As Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, he said, if you know yourself, then you will not be harmed by what is said about you. And this is why the work of knowing ourselves, even from, a psychological, both psychological and spiritual level, is so important. Because what it does is that it roots you in the truth about who you are. And that becomes like, it has a grounding effect. And you have like when a tree has good rooting, right, and it's properly grounded, stands tall and strong. If a tree doesn't have strong rooting, what happens? It sways a lot. It's not, and that's exactly kind of like a yo-yo, right? You're just like, you're going in whatever direction the wind takes you. And so we don't want to be a leaf in the wind. We don't want to live our life, constantly at the mercy, and in this case, the wind is the people, right? And so we want to be grounded. We want to walk, feeling that strength. We want to walk feeling that sense of security that is rooted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so how do we get to know ourselves? So again, I said we start off by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help with that, because we are not the destination. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for knowledge that is beneficial even about ourselves. One of the things that we have to do is we have to get to know what our core beliefs and core values are. And this is really important. So in psychology, we know that people's actions and behaviors are often driven by their core beliefs and their core values. So what are core beliefs? Core beliefs they're often referred to as almost like your worldview. And they're the final interpretation that you make about your, who you are, about who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, about your experiences. So you have core beliefs about different areas in your life. You have many core beliefs about who you are, about your worth, for example, about what you deserve. You have core beliefs about who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And that's why it's so important to get to know who Allah what Allah has said about himself, rather than forming our own interpretations of who he is. This is why knowing his names and knowing who he is so important, because then your core beliefs about who Allah is change. So core beliefs are your final interpretations about, who you are, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, your experiences. When something happens to you, how do you interpret them? So two people can go through the same experience, but they can have completely different interpretations of that experience. So your core beliefs are, so again, they can be about anything: yourself, your experiences, what happens to you, others, about the world you live in, about your path, about your future. And there are these very deeply rooted truths within you that play a role in how you approach your life and how you interact with others and how you interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, a person who, let's say, is afraid to make dua, right, could have a core belief that they're not worthy of good things happening to them. And this affects their God image, how they perceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And perhaps that's something they learned. This is why I love that integration between psychology and spirituality, because they're both interacting with each other. A person could have learned this core belief growing up that they're not worthy of certain things. They're not worthy of good things happening to them. So guess what? They project that, or they apply that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why am I going to make dua? I see this a lot. Why am I going to make dua? Allah, I'm not worthy of that. I'm not worthy of Allah giving me that. Me get that? So that's why knowing ourselves is so powerful. What are the core beliefs that are guiding me? You know how one of the best ways, and I'll continue talking about this throughout this series, inshallah, but one of the best ways to get to know your core beliefs is to assess the patterns of behaviors, like the unhelpful behaviors you have that keep coming up, like the unhelpful reactions that keep coming up, the triggers, those moments you find yourself in the same spot again. I'm feeling the same way. I reacted the same way. I engaged in the same self-sabotaging behavior. Whatever it is that is unhelpful, or that cycle of unhelpful behavior, and you find yourself, because that's how powerful core beliefs are. You will find them driving those behaviors, those same behaviors that you want to get rid of. And we can have positive core beliefs. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can unlearn unhelpful core beliefs by doing the work, and also and doing the work of replacing them with helpful core beliefs, so that your emotions and actions are guided by better beliefs. But pay attention to those moments where you find yourself triggered the same way, reacting the same way, having a out of proportion reaction to something, and you're like, man, what keeps bringing me here? Or you find yourself sabotaging. Let's say you've been working towards a goal, and every time you get close to the goal, a specific goal, you sabotage it. What is the core belief guiding that? Because there's a powerful truth that's guiding that behavior, that's keeping you going back to the same destructive habits or the same unhelpful behaviors, and the things that you know do not serve you and serve your soul and serve your awakening and your relationship with Allah. So pay attention to those moments. And that's what it really means. You know, the saying, man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu, is that you're exploring yourself with the means of assessing these barriers that come between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, I keep finding myself in the same reaction, the same behaviors, in the same self-sabotaging, habit, or whatever it is you're trying to change. A lot of times people feel very helpless when they find themselves like they put in a little effort to change and they find themselves in the same spot. It's because there's a core belief that you still have to address. It's deeper. What is guiding you? Let's say you keep choosing the same kind of friend that maybe is not a good friend to you. What is guiding that? What core belief is guiding that? Not to say that, by the way, you have to take this also with a balance, because people sometimes take things in very absolute ways, and then they'll say like, okay, well, that means that it's, if you have a friend and that friend ends up not being a good friend, that means like you attracted that friend, or something's wrong with you. No, like sometimes, everything is, of course, Allah's plan, and everything is meant to teach us, but we want to also be, reflective over our own role in what happens to us in our life, right? And so these are some things to just take into mind when you're finding yourself in engaging in things that you have been trying to break for so long. Core beliefs are also, what contribute to insecurities you might have, or attachments to perfectionism, or excessive self-doubts, and and the need to people please, right? A core belief, for example, that's guiding people's tendency to people please is that I am only worthy when everyone's happy with me. Many people are guided by that core belief. So when we could incorporate the dhikr of La ilaha illallah here, which is you program yourself to, when you say La ilah, you think of, no, people are not my Lord. Illallah, Ya Allah, you are my Lord. You being pleased with me is more important. As you're doing the work to also heal and to change these behaviors, but incorporating dhikr alongside that is so powerful. Because now you are aware of, as you're doing it, you're dependent on Ash-Shafi, the healer, who doesn't just heal physical wounds, he also heals emotional wounds. He heals unhelpful core beliefs. And then the other thing that we have to get to know is also our core values. Your core values are what you deem important in life. And if you want to figure out what your core values are, all you have to do is look at like how you live your days. That's it. Because a human being will show up for what they deem valuable. So for you to figure out what is valuable to you, what is your core value, just look at how you structure your day. What does your day revolve around? So if we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is important to us, does your day revolve around your prayers, your 5 meetings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do your 5 meetings with Allah revolve around everything else? People say, well, I love myself, right? Which is a beautiful thing. But then during the day, they don't show up for themselves. They don't respect themselves. They don't show up for the things that serve them, because loving ourselves in a sacred way is not just, spas and, that superficial version of self-care that we see on social media. No, it's how do I show up for what my soul needs? Self-love is also showing up to prayer on time. I love myself enough to take myself to what I need, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Ghaniyu. He's not in need. Self-love is, taking yourself to the things that benefit you. You coming here today is self-love. Showing up to what will nourish you, to what will benefit you. You could have chosen to be anywhere else, but you chose to come to a gathering that remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you and allow you to keep going to the spaces that benefit you, inshallah. So assessing what your core values are really important. And you could do this today. You could sit with yourself and assess, what do you deem important in your life? So some examples of like core values, that common core values that people have are like, loyalty, authenticity, being truthful, being trustworthy, healthy living. So, but many times people don't spend years or whole lifetimes. They don't even know what is valuable to them. They never take the time to really assess that. And it's important to assess, because what could have been valuable for you a few years ago might not be what you deem valuable today. And let's say you assess your core values today. Guess what you also can do now? It's not about denying the truth. It's about knowing the truth so we can change it. So that we can elevate ourselves. Meaning that, wow, this is the truth of my core values. Sometimes it's all the time, it's about being honest with yourself. And saying, wow, I actually, you know what? I really wish this wasn't my core value, but it is. This is what's been guiding me. And having the courage to admit that and to accept that. Acceptance doesn't mean I don't want to change something. Acceptance is having the courage to face what is true about you so that you can change it. Because you don't have the power to change anything you don't accept. Many people struggle with self-acceptance because they think if they accept things about themselves, it means that they are condoning it. Not realizing that our lack of acceptance of truths about ourselves, whether they're good or bad, whether they need to be changed or not, when we deny truths within ourselves, we have no power over them. When you are in denial of something, can you change it? No. So you can only change, what is the opposite of denial? Acceptance. You can only change what you accept about yourself. And this is why people stay stuck for so many years. They're not willing to face the difficult truths about themselves. And then they stay stuck. So you can only be transformed and changed to the extent that you are willing to face the truth about yourself, about your actions, about your beliefs, about your values, about what's been guiding you, about your emotions. Yeah, I feel this way. Yeah, this hurt me. Yeah, I'm angry about that. What do many people do? No, I'm not angry. No, I'm not mad. No, I'm not. And guess what? What happens? It shows up in their interactions with that person that they're angry with. They become resentful. They have out of proportion reactions to things that that person's like, why are they so mad? It comes out anyway. Anything, and that's the thing. It's like we think that what we deny or suppress or avoid, it has no power over us. Actually, it has more power over you. What you do not accept about yourself has more power over you than what you accept about yourself. And I want you to think about this. When you don't like something about yourself and you don't accept it, the second somebody else mentions it, what are you going to do? No. What are you talking about? Your defensiveness becomes so much stronger. This is why it goes back to what Imam Sufyan al-Thawri said, right? That when you know yourself, you're not harmed by what people say about you. So when we don't accept ourselves, we actually become more vulnerable to being harmed by other people's words. Because what you reject about yourself, you will reject the second somebody else notices it about you. But when you accept yourself, and you know who you are, and you understand I'm imperfect. I'm going to be imperfect. So to actually, it's interesting, right? Like to not practice self-acceptance and to actually deny our imperfections or our negative things, our shortcomings, our flaws is actually, it's like living with that delusion that we're supposed to be perfect. But we'll never be perfect. So why spend all that energy trying to be perfect when you are not perfect, will never be perfect, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect? You might as well use that energy to actually face your imperfection so that you can try working on it. At least the things, not all imperfection is bad, right? But the imperfections that are harming your life, that are affecting your behaviors. So whatever you don't face in your life, your dishonesty with yourself, your denial of what you need to change, your denial of your own truths, only becomes more powerful over you. It has more power over you. But when you accept who you are, and you accept what you need to change, and you accept your truths, and you say, okay, you're like becoming like a witness to them without judgment. This is this is something I need to change, and I accept it. I need to work on this. You will find a surrendering, peace within you. It's like, this happens when you surrender to truth, because you don't realize how much we spend fighting truth, how much energy we spend trying to avoid truth and lessons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to teach us. But when you say, yeah, this is the truth, like, when someone lies and then they finally can't handle it and they say the truth, what do they feel? Relief. Because that's the power of truth. It's the same thing when you accept what you need to accept about in any struggle, in any situation you're struggling with right now. Anything that you're going through that's difficult, take a moment and say, what is true about this situation? Good or bad? What are all the truths about the situation? What are the truths of how I feel? Yeah, I feel like this. Just own it. I feel like this. This is how I feel. But what will people think about how I feel? They're going to think I'm angry. They're going to think I'm upset. No. It doesn't matter. That's how you feel. What you feel. That's the truth. So guess what? Now your energy is not going to be on, oh my gosh, I need to monitor other people's impression. I need to appear that I'm forgiving and that I'm, like we have this happens a lot in the Muslim community where like people will be like, they're angry, so angry inside, they're not forgiving, but they say, what do they say? I forgive. But no, you didn't forgive. But they're so worried that they're going to be perceived as not righteous enough, not religious enough, not forgiving enough, that they rush to say, I forgive. And then it shows up in their resentment and in their behavior. No, your behavior, see, your behavior show the truth. No, you didn't forgive. So you're spending all this energy trying to present an outward image that doesn't match your inward atmosphere. And that takes more energy than just simply allowing yourself to feel what you feel and say, yes, I want to get to a point where I can forgive, but that's not today. And yes, I want to work on that, or I want to work on resolving this, but that's not where I'm at today. And ya Allah, help me with that. So there's power in just cultivating the courage to face our truths, to face where we are, so that we can be better guided to reach where we want to be. And I'll pause here so I could leave, 10 minutes for Q&A, inshallah. So any questions? Yeah.
So when you were talking about people pleasing, reminded me of a question that I said.
Like what's
So, we're always like, especially in Islam, we're always told to like see the good in people, see their good qualities. But how can we like draw that balance where we do that, but also like protect ourselves from people that are like harming us? something that sometimes confuses me because I know that I'm supposed to protect myself, but I also don't want to just see the bad in people.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's, context is really important in every situation, right? And so so I'll try to answer this as generally as possible, but I say that because I don't want everyone to apply what I'm about to say to every single situation, especially when it comes to like harm or abuse, or, if people are in situations where, they're being abused, the priority isn't to forgive the abuser, right? At that point, right? Like I would give a completely different set of feedback to that situation if someone is in a current situation where they're being abused. But if you're talking about, I think what you're talking about is just navigating that balance between being good to others and having a heart that has a good opinion of other people and views people in a good way, but also protecting oneself and not putting oneself in a place to be harmed. Because that's something that's not talked about enough, is that Allah never, like, as Muslims, we're not told to put ourselves in position to be harmed, right? But I think in today's world, that's why there's so much complexity to even addressing one thing, because I think in today's world, harm is being very, like when people say, I need to cut this person off because I was triggered, like it really depends. That's why context is so important. Like, just because somebody triggers you does not mean you need to cut them off. That's not the only solution to you being triggered. You know what's also a solution? You working on your triggers. You healing. Because there are a lot of good people that might trigger you, right? There are a lot of good people in our lives that might trigger us, and they have no intention of triggering us. And it could be because of our own psychology and what we went through, our own traumas. And so the balance comes with, even when you protect yourself, right? And even let's say you're in a situation where you've seen a pattern of behavior from someone that shows you that they have harmed you, or they're not kind, or maybe they're possibly verbally abusive, right? Or, they just are not treating you the way that you would treat other people. And it's not something that's pleasing to Allah. The key is, can you place boundaries while still taking care of your heart? Many of us, and this is what people often miss, is that caring for our hearts in front of Allah does not necessarily mean we say, I forgive right away. Or does not necessarily mean we keep the same closeness that we had to that individual. How you care for your heart is how you take care of this heart that you go to bed with every night. Meaning, what is the state of your heart? Is it viewing that person? Are you sitting there harboring a bad opinion of that, like sitting there like, wishing ill will on that person? Are you walking away? You can recognize that somebody has things to work on, but you don't wish them ill will. And you don't say, oh, they're a bad person. You start saying all these things, right? You can walk away from people and recognize they're not good for you after careful assessment, and still take care of your heart and make dua for them, for example. Ya Allah, please help them. Please heal them. Please help them get what they need in life so they don't need to hurt other people. Because, hurt people hurt people. But it doesn't mean that you put yourself in a position to continuously be hurt by that person. And so again, I'm giving a very general, answer, but please understand that I might give different feedback to, say, somebody who says that they're being abused, or, you know what I mean? So like, that's why it's good if you're going through anything like that to go to therapy to do that work, so you get customized feedback to your situation. I hope that answers your, The immense what?
The immense guilt that sometimes can come with the boundaries that you set, especially which time and time again we're told from others you're gateway to Jannah.
I want to hear you so well. So no, it's okay.
Time and time again you're told that your mother is your gateway to Jannah.
Yeah.
And people seem to have trouble with that balance of not
Yeah.
cutting them off, but creating boundaries with immense guilt that comes from that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's one of those like complex situations, because I also don't believe in, the feedback of just telling, people are getting feedback all the time. Just cut your parents bother you, cut them off. No, we're not going to give that, because we're not going to give that feedback. But do I believe that in such certain situations where there is abuse, especially by the parents, that taking time to heal is important, with the intention of, let's say that this parent, every time their child talks to them, they're calling them names, or they're physically abusive. I really think it's important for that person to, there's no way that person is going to even be able to not be triggered by that parent. Even let's say the abuse stopped, like in the time after, and that person's still going to be triggered by that person. So taking time to establish a distance that allows that person to heal. And you can set, what kind of communication you want at that time. Like, I'm not going to cut off ties completely, or, but let's say I'm going to make sure that I call once a week, and to have that conversation if need be, that like, I need time to heal. My intention is not to cut off ties with you. My intention is to heal because this abuse has really hurt me, and I need time to take care of myself, so I can also, we don't realize also that when we establish boundaries, it doesn't just protect the child, it protects the parent. You know why? Because the parent is also sinning when they keep abusing the child. So when the child sets boundaries, you're also protecting the parent in a way from continuously sinning, especially if they can't stop. If every time they see the child, they're verbally abusing them, they're sinning in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because their child is an amana, and a person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask them about. So it's the intention, like, we're not, just because, I'm going to cut the person off. No. What is your intention? My intention, ya Allah, is that I need time to heal. And my intention is to revisit this, or to maintain enough of a distance so that I'm not breaking Silat al-Rahim. And even, let's say, if the person can't have, let's say it's a severe situation, that person can't have communication, it's so triggering, have a conversation with Allah. Ya Allah, I can't. It's so hard. I want to, but it's so hard. Allow me to heal and help me come back to it if possible. But I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, and this is why, like, I really, if for another situation I might give different feedback, but when in cases when a person is highly triggered, that person has parents that are constantly abusing them, I think that it's important to prioritize healing, because that's how generational cycles of harm continue, is that when that person doesn't heal and then continues to do it they have a lot of resentment, they continue to do it to their children. So I think healing is important, and healing is I believe, what our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us.
That one phrase you said that was like, the one who knows himself is not concerned about what other people say about them.
Yeah.
So like, is there any incentive to like try to keep a good reputation? Because obviously, like, your reputation, the only one that matters is the one that like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I knew this question would come up.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, like, is there any incentive that you should try to like keep a good reputation among people that like have bad opinions about you, which are probably false?
I think if it's affecting, that wouldn't be reputation though. That would be, reputation is about monitoring my image, okay? Caring about relationships is important, is different. Let's say like you want to make sure that like someone you love doesn't have the wrong assumption of a behavior, of something that you did. That's softening hearts, right? That's different. That's not like, I'm trying to care for my image. I'm trying to like care for relationships, so that like I'm trying to take care of the hearts of others as well. That's different, like, hey, listen, like, I didn't, when I did this, it wasn't because of this, or like trying to like, it wasn't intended, I didn't mean to hurt you, and if I did, I'm sorry. That's different, right? But I think, it's hard. The reason why I smiled when you asked that, because we live in a world where what's constantly being promoted? Take care of your reputation, take care of your image, take care of how you're presenting yourself on social media, on LinkedIn, on, God knows what, right? Like, it's all about take care of your image. And I think that we can be fooled sometimes by that. Like we're like, we're, I don't know how to say this, but like we think it's a good thing, but we're not realizing we're actually becoming like obsessed with image. And it's happening in the world we live in today. Oh, this is like, professional promotion, and this is, but it's like, no, it's actually increasing our attachment to caring for our image. So Allah knows best. I think assessing every situation on its own, asking yourself the hard questions, what am I seeking in this moment? And what am I really like, driven by? Is it like to maintain my image so people can say this and this about me? Or is it because I really care about the heart of this person and I care about our relationship enough to make sure that they know that I don't have any ill feelings towards them, or, because there's a very big difference. And, I always think of the hadith where we're taught that there will be people on the Day of Judgment who will go to Allah and they'll say like, I studied for your sake, or I became a hafid of the Quran for your sake. And Allah will say, no, you didn't. Or you became a scholar so that people could say that you're a scholar, that you're knowledgeable. So we have to be very careful in our times, because it can be very easy to chase image in the name of other things that seem less harmless, Yeah.
I had another question about the parents. I know sometimes people move away for college, or maybe they're still staying with their parents.
Mhm.
Or I feel like there's a lot of arguments that can start taking place when a child moves back from college into their family home.
Yeah.
How do we manage those boundaries and not trying to take everything that parents say to heart? Because after you reach maybe 25,
Yeah.
now you're in a state where maybe you don't necessarily agree with everything that your parents say. Alhamdulillah, they pushed you to have a certain education so you could start thinking for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they also have some cultural understandings instead of Islamic understandings. How do you manage that and not let it affect your your heart and really create any resentment towards your parents?
Yeah, that's quite the challenge, right? I mean, I don't know. I think it's hard to answer questions like this again without context, but I think to answer it generally, I think that we can still be our own person while still being respectful to our parents, and I think that's being our own person doesn't have to be that we're arrogant or that we think we know it all, or that, and this is something that we forget, like, especially when you mention like people go away to college, many times people will go away and they'll study, and we have to be careful because they get this idea that they're more knowledgeable now than their parents, and knowledge, we worship this idea of having knowledge sometimes, but if knowledge doesn't improve our behavior and our ability to interact with others with compassion and respect, then we don't really have knowledge. We just have information, we just have arrogance. And I think that's what we need to like really pay attention to, is that like, when we learn, can we stay humble even with our parents who took care of us? And navigating that, like, you can be your own person and know your values and know yourself, but still treat your parents with respect, and it doesn't, and you choose your battles, right? Like, you have to really assess what's important to you, and you have to assess what is worth, continuing the conversation about, because not everything is a battle. Not everything has to be a battle. And that's something that we don't realize in our day and age. We think that there's always power in speaking up. Like, there is power in speaking up, but there's also power in not having to speak up sometimes. See, voice is powerful, but it's not just in using it, it's also in not using. The power of voice is not just, oh, I used my voice. No, I chose to stay silent right now, and that's powerful too. Because when you know who you are, you don't bark at everything, right? You don't have to speak up at everything. You're choosing what is important to me right now. Okay, no, this is a value that's really important to me, especially like, let's say if someone has parents who are more cultural, let's say, than religious, and you have more religious values and cultural, then in those moments it becomes important for you to speak up, right? And say like, hey, this is really important to me because Allah is my highest value. And I don't want to go against what my highest value is, right? Or what he has called me to. So it's very hard to give, cookie cutter answers to things like this. So every context is important, but I think that assessing what is important to you and making sure there's nothing wrong with communicating your values or communicating what is important to you, but it doesn't have to mean that we're disrespectful. And if you find yourself highly triggered by your parents, and listen, I've worked with people in their 60s who are still sensitive to what their parents say. I don't think that ever goes away, by the way. But I think there's a difference between being sensitive to what your parents say and always wanting your parents to think good of you and to, and constantly being highly triggered where you have out of proportion reactions, where it allows you to reach to a point where you're disrespecting them. Then that needs to be assessed, right? And you need to if you need space to kind of figure that out so you're not engaging in that behavior, take it. But I think that communication with respect, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing un-Islamic about that. Yeah. Okay, I think we're over time. So we'll stop here and I'll see you guys next week, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at icnyu.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.